Adesumbo. You're welcome this morning, Mr. Adesumbo. It's good to have you.
It's good to be here.
Looking at the tariff, yes, thank you very much. Looking at the tariff increase, let's have your overview on the whole situation to start with, or development.
To start with, Donald Trump is doing what he said he would do. America first, and every other thing comes second. And while he was campaigning, he said something like he wants to bring back American jobs from where they've been exported to places like China specifically. And in order to do that, the factories that have increased will have to be reopened. And when they are opened, then they have to produce into the markets, the local market. And if you are going to be competing with foreign goods, then you'll have to do something about discouraging imports from overseas. And those are the undertone behind the imposition of the tariff. But the thing is, the way and manner he went about it, Trump being a bully, went about the idea in a bullish manner, and of course that's why it's generating reactions from all over the world. And he too didn't learn from history. It's not the first time that tariffs will be imposed like that in the US. During the Great Depression, I think 1931, President Hoover then signed a smoothly tariff pact. That pact was meant to increase tariffs that is placed on imports to promote the local industry, because there have been depression, all the companies were struggling, so they wanted to now raise the tariff so that whatever America is producing will be consumed locally, and that would help the industry to grow. But there was a backlash, because what happened was that they could also not export their products, and they cannot consume everything they were producing. So, and eventually what he wanted to prevent happened. There were job loss, there were cuts in wages, and of course it generated crisis. And eventually the president did not win the second term. So, but Trump is serving the second term. He may have learned from that, but decided to dismiss it, because the situation then, America was not in depression. The globe was not in depression. He felt, well, America has productive capacity now, and they also have a guaranteed market to consume whatever they're producing. But it may also be wrong, because we are now in an era of globalization. And there's this interrelationship, and no country is an island of its own. You definitely need other countries supporting other areas.
But do you think this would also affect U.S. economy?
It will, because by the time, for instance, what's today's date? Today is 8. By is it 9th? Yeah. Tomorrow, Chinese tariff will become effective 34%, and that one will affect the American economy. Why? Because there are so many American business interests who are producing in China. And they are producing there because there's cheap labor in China. And they just produce there and ship back to US. Now, such goods, even though they were produced by American companies, becomes an import in the US. And the tariff he has imposed will affect them. And that is a problem. So those goods will now become expensive, out of the reach of American populace, who are used to getting, consuming them. And of course, those business interests. That's why I said to someone that, well, it's not something that will last. It will definitely have a rethink by the time he sees the full effect of what he is doing.
Mr. Adesumbo, let's come back home a bit to the green, white, green. We know that this policy, a lot of people have pointed at it, is majorly aimed at the likes of China, amongst other major exporters, given the back and forth you've seen in the past week between them. Nigeria is still caught in that crossfire. For what it's worth, let's mention that we are not America's largest trading partners. We know that. And we still send about $10 billion worth of goods to the US annually. But 80% of that is crude oil.
And gas.
And gas. We have US buyers expected to pay an extra 14% on these imports. All of a sudden, our oil and gas looks a lot less competitive than it used to be. And we are looking at the possibilities of the ripple effects, where it could come from, what it could look like, and how bad it could be. Now, we have a situation where we have high employment rates, insecurity, currency decline presently on. These ripple effects, what areas are we looking at, and how badly will they affect us?
It depends on how the government wants to go about it. As far as I'm concerned, the ripple effects is not supposed to affect the masses much. But you have a government in place that thinks more about themselves than the masses. There are ways around this. Yes, what goes to US from Nigeria, majorly, oil and gas. And the reason why there's that skepticism and fear out there is because it's a major source of our FX. And we have a semi-dollarized economy. But who are those who transact in dollars? That's the first question we should ask ourselves. They are not the masses. It is these big people too. You understand? And they are the one that also scramble. They are the one that goes for medical tourism. They are the one that their children pursue academic program abroad. They are the ones that go for pilgrimage and all that. These are things that put pressure on our currency because you have to source FX. Well, the other time we were talking about Naira for crude and as against buying in dollars because our exploring industry, the petroleum sector, the upstream sector of our petroleum industry is dominated by the IOCs. And these IOCs are owned by the same US. So, and they've been doing this trading, they just get the thing here cheaper and to them it is not import per se, but we get royalties in return for whatever they take out from our local economy. And with this development, it's going to reduce the rate at which we generate foreign currency, especially the US dollar. But Nigeria has a population of 225 million. We are yet to conduct a new census, so we are just guessing the figures. Now, that population guarantees two things. It guarantees cheap labor for any industry that wants to come. It guarantees market for any company that is producing. Just make it attractive, people will buy because you have the population. Now, what is affecting the industry? Infrastructural deficits. And that's where the problem with Nigeria is. And that's why a country like US can bully us. Ordinarily, if we had gotten our acts together all along, we are the ones that are supposed to be bullied because we have the raw materials to produce, but we do not have the infrastructure to process what we have. That's the problem with Nigeria. That's the area where the government needs to look at. But they can save money to cushion the effect by cutting down the expenses of the government. You understand? All the frivolities happening at that level can be toned down so that the budget that is supposed to be affected is just a matter of looking at the recurrent. What are the things that you can suspend? What are the things that you can cut down on so that the capital would stay? That's the way the government is supposed to approach it. That's why I said it depends on what they decided to do at the end of the day. But I don't see any reason for us to panic as a nation.
Are you sure? Because I'm looking at the fact that even a little drop in demand, say we have with the current tariffs and all of that in place, we have a drop of about 14% thereabouts from the figures that we have looked at earlier on. That's about 1 billion plus in dollars. That's a large chunk of whatever we budgeted for 2024. And you know that we are still looking for more areas to generate revenue for the coming years. In the midst of, whatever is happening economically to the country, these are issues that we need to actually, really address. Imports also are looking problematic for us because, there's areas where we could feel the heat. We're already bringing about $5 billion worth of goods from the US alone.
Whatever we get from the US, we can get somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying, I told you, American factories are in China. We can get from China. Now, there is an agreement between Nigeria and China. It's called currency swap deal, signed in 2018. Up till now, not being implemented because of insufficient forex. And that's why we choose to be trading with the US so that we can get this product. Well, our problem is because we are not a producing country. You understand? We rely more on importation of finished products. And what we export out there are not value added, but mostly raw materials. Oil and gas are raw materials, they're not processed ones. You understand? We export crude oil. It's just of recent that Dangote is exporting refined products. Now, we need to be exporting value added. International law says 70% local content. That is what will give us that rating that will give you a favorable balance of trade as a nation. Now, when you don't meet up with that, because you have infrastructural deficits, you have insecurity challenge, there is corruption problem. All these are what Nigerians are dealing with. And the government seems not to be serious about it. Because if, for instance, why should power be so difficult to tap? When everything that is used to generate power that science has given to us, we have here. You understand? But we still could not generate power. And the ones we generate, transmission becomes problematic. And when it's not transmitted, how will it be distributed? So we have this challenge, most of which are structural problems, that once you take away or you readjust the structure, some of them would naturally go away. But the government, for political reasons, will not do it. These are issues that we are dealing with as a nation. Until we begin to now do the right thing, have people with real political will to do this thing, not that they are difficult, but political interests always conflict with it. And when you have people in government that are ambitious, will be thinking of a second term, even before spending 2 years in the first term, then such decision becomes difficult to take.
Talking of Nigeria,
implementing the currency swap agreement, for instance. Let's do the math. Naira to a dollar currently is about 1,600. Naira to Chinese yuan is 250 naira. Now, you import, which one will be better off if you import the same product, to import a product from China or to import a product from China, from US? Now they are saying this, we can also do trade boycotts. Do you understand? Already, they know Nigerians will respond. Before we respond, one of their trade representatives, he was already tweeting, listing 25 items that we banned from coming to that country, from coming to Nigeria from that country as far back as 2018, and using that as an excuse in 2025. That is to tell you that that policy will not stand. Because Nigeria too, it's just that we do not have serious governments in place. We are not a country that anybody can just bully. Like that, we have our own strength, which we are not taking advantage of.
Okay, Nigeria, talking about Nigeria being a consuming nation and not a producing nation, what can Nigeria do to take us from being just a consuming nation to a producing nation?
Put infrastructure in place. Ensure that everywhere is safe. Naturally, people will beg to come and invest in this country.
And that boosts our economy.
It will not only boost the economy, the unemployment issue that we have will go away. These companies will be taxed, more revenue for governments. So we have a robust GDP, robust revenue base. We will stop borrowing because we'll have enough to fund our budget. These are the advantages, but you have to do the first thing. You have to lay the foundation. You understand? Because you cannot build anything on nothing.
But with this latest development now, so many countries are affected, obviously. Do you think the global market will be stabilized anytime soon?
Not so many countries are affected. You understand? The only bloc that seems to be jittery, and it's because of their formation, is the EU. China doesn't care. That's why they could say, okay, you are imposing 14%, we are giving you back 34%. Because, one, they have a population. Almost 1 billion people live in China. You cannot bully Brazil. You cannot bully India. So it's not all countries that are affected.
So the
stocks in Asia is rising, while that of the US is falling. So who is being affected?
So is this more like a witch hunting situation or a case of selected few, probably wanting to deal with some certain countries. Is that the case here?
It's a case of Trump not knowing what he's doing. When you are in government, you don't take emotional decisions to formulate government policies. You will make mistakes. That is what he is dealing with. Now I'm sure there will be much pressure coming from the Congress, coming from the judicial system, coming from the business community, of which is a part of in the US, that he will have to be dealing with. And one thing I know about him is that once the real figures are put at his face, he will definitely back down.
Are you sure he will renege? Because a lot of people from the UK, we have had statements from the governor of the Bank of England, we've had something coming from the EU itself. Even the Treasury Secretary of the US, Scott Bessent, also mentioned something that when the figures are put in there and the negotiations are done, there will definitely be cuts. Trump himself has alluded to the fact that there will be permanent negotiations and there will be some that will be temporarily put in place. So with all of this, are you sure we'll still renege, looking at the figures that we have, looking at the fact that there are some countries who are willing to actually sit at the negotiation table?
The countries that are kind of jittery, I told you, is the EU country. And they have other things in common. They are all members of NATO and they are good trading partners. But the thing is, other blocs do not care. They are the ones that are not really affected. And now, because they all have a common place in Africa, which is the source of raw materials, and of course there's a scramble going on, and China is a big player there. And countries like Nigeria, like Egypt, like South Africa begin to get themselves together. The problem they have is because they've been able to divide Africa over the years. We've not really come up. For instance, we have an Africa Continental Free Trade area, which we are not exploring. You understand? And there are so many administrative bottlenecks. For instance, access to travel visa. It's easy to get a UK visa than to get a South African visa, for instance. These are the problems that we are dealing with as an African land. That's why at the level of AU rather, they need to get their economies together and really decide on what they want to do. Even within the sub-region of ECOWAS, we still have issues.
Mr. Adesumbo, you mentioned the CFTA now, and a lot of people would have questions about how we will go about that, given, you mentioned it yourself, bottlenecks that we have, the challenges that we have presently. Aside from that, do you think one strategic option would be to leverage on the side called China and India, given that we already have some trading with them, we have trade ties with them already, they already buy a percentage, significant volume of crude oil. Do you think that that would be a very good option for us in the midst of this? Or how well do you think we can diversify to ensure we get better?
We have crude oil in this place. And now we have refining capacity, as little as we may see. For instance, our daily quota currently is 1.6 million liters per day, barrels. Dangote alone has the capacity to take 650,000 from it already. Now, the NNPC refineries put together, if they get their REX to work, will also take about 400,000. Add that to it, we've already locally have the capacity to refine over 1 million liters. You understand? These are things that I'm saying, if Nigeria had gotten its act together, we are not supposed to be bothered about things like this. But corruption, politicizing of matters that require serious thinking is part of what we are dealing with. And that is why somebody like Trump can just come, wake up one morning from the wrong side of the bed and decide to begin to trouble the whole world. The whole world would see him as one man. For instance, when Putin decided to invade Ukraine, the whole world rise against him, saying that, come, what's your problem? Leave these people alone. Something similar, though it's not a full-fledged combat, but an economic war. A tariff combat is what is going on now, which the whole world is resisting. Now, in Africa, they will all be looking at the direction at which of these African countries will go. each of us have multiple bilateral, multilateral trade agreements with these Western powers. Now, if one is the one violating, because somehow within the bilateral agreement that we have, I'm sure raising tariff would be part of what they will consider. And Nigeria too has raised tariff over the years, especially since this administration come on board. We've raised our import tariff by over 200%. And nobody is making any noise about it. Even though the idea was not to protect any local industry, but it was more to raise revenue to run government.
Do you think that with everything in place and everything has been said about the present president before he got into power, do you think that this will be a good turning point for us as a country?
It's supposed to be. Because by now, though I wouldn't know what the EMT will come up with at the meeting they're trying to hold, because they would have evaluated the whole situation, compare it vis-a-vis the Nigerian situation, and think of a way around it. That is their job. That's why they are called economic management team. And it comprises of bankers, captains of industries, established business tycoon, and they are the ones that run the economy. They would look at the effects, and of course some government functionaries. They will look at what are the possible effects that this will have on the economy, and how do we go about it. It's their own job to see to that. And of course they know that already our inflation is at 28%. How do we prevent it from going further up? They will look at the interest rate at the level that it is. How do we maintain it if you cannot reduce it? These are things that determines the direction of businesses. So and that is their own job now, to sit down and consider them. And they are not dullers, they are brilliant people. It's just that politics always stand in their way, and that is where I used to have issues with them.
You talk about a lot of things the federal government can do, but what are the immediate action that needs to be taken to make sure this hike doesn't have significant impact on our economy?
We need to adjust our public finance, the budget especially. We are still at the start of the second quarter, and this is the month that even 2025 budget is meant to be implemented. And I'm not surprised when I saw that they may have to look at the budget, because that is the immediate thing that they can do. And what do? Do a kind of environment. Look at items that can't be toned down in the recurrent and divert to the capital where you need money put into, because there are lots of capital projects that are ongoing.
Victor.
All right, so now let's look at the US in itself. There are questions on whether they will benefit or there will be an implosion. China already talking about drawbacks on toys, several other things, and phones manufactured by the US. Already, some markets are starting to look at Chinese products in the phone industry, the telecommunication industry in general, and talking about all these technologies and gadgets. How far do you think there will be, the back and forth between these two countries before we see either someone ceding ground or someone removing whatever it is the announcement was about?
For now, the Chinese are yet to respond. They are planning to respond tomorrow.
But already see the stocks have been monitored, and we are seeing a decline for US, products.
Yes, that's the early warning sign, is what we call it in conflict analysis, for Donald Trump and his team. If they don't respond early, then they will be in for a disaster. When you have a heady president that is not ready to listen to what the market forces is saying, not allowing the economy to, and he's a Republican, that's the irony of the whole thing. You understand? So he needs to really look inward. The way you run business, it's not the way you run government. If you take business orientation into government, you run into problems. And that's one of the reasons why Trump is having this issue. Yes, you are the chief executive, but not chief executive in that sense. You need to really consult widely before you formulate policy. Now, Americans have a way of responding. Already there are protests that have been staged concerning this.
Yeah.
More will still come until it backs down. The Congress will be meeting, both chambers, to decide how they would use legislative procedure to stop him. So these are things that would happen there. And of course, his team, his colleagues within the business sector would have told him to. There are other things that we expect him to really look into, like gun control. If you want to cut, why not look at that area, ammunitions? But you are looking at other things that the country, and there are things that they have the largest economy in the world. That is what is giving them that sense of superiority, that they can do whatever they like. But there are countries playing catch up that are actually in empty competition with you, like China. You understand? And already we have a BRICS bloc whose main agenda is to counter the dominance of the dollar in international markets.
You're mentioning those on the other side. Let's look at this side. Yesterday, Trump claimed that they are taking in almost, I'm looking at the figures now, almost $2 billion a day from tariffs alone. He gave an evening speech to lawmakers from the Republican side, and he said he would soon announce major tariffs on pharmaceutical imports. Another question coming in here, but then his argument is that these duties would push drug companies to move manufacturing operations to the US, like we have always heard him say. But then we have scheduled talks with South Korea and Japan. The Italian Prime Minister is due to land in the US next week to speak with them about this. And it says that there are about 70 countries who are ready to come in. And we also have a stop trade official also mentioning that Argentina, Vietnam, and Israel are amongst those that had offered to reduce their tariff. Was the aim basically to get them to reduce their own tariffs?
That speech is a politician speaking to convince his people. Reality is speaking otherwise. What gives him the assurance that those jobs will fly back into the US?
But if
it's going to be expensive for these companies to operate within the US. The labor there is not cheap, and they are in business to make profits. By the time the cost of production is too high, how do you expect them to sell the products in a cheap way? These are things that he will have to contend with, and those are the figures that will be thrown at him. And now, with the factories come up the following day, it will still take a process. So these are things that he is not considering. He just wants to believe that, yes, America is, well, for the funding that he is putting an end to, that has his own advantage. At least the American dollar will stay within the economy. Fine. But when it comes to trade and production, no country has a monopoly of that. No country.
But as we wrap up now, what do you think Nigeria needs to do economically to get better and be a major decision maker in global economy?
We need to build capacity. We've said this times without number. And how do we build capacity? Those things that we've been playing lip service with, we need to be serious about it. For instance, in the news this morning, the governor of Borno State was lamenting that Boko Haram is resurging again, and of course it is obvious that these people are on a mission of land grabbing to eliminate the locals and all that. Now that belt that Boko Haram is operating used to be our largest beans cultivation center. Look at the price of beans since Boko Haram has started. And these are products that we can be exporting if we would secure that environment. Go to the northwest, the area where the bandits have decided to make their colony is where rice was being cultivated. Now, look at how much we buy a bag of rice because of that crisis. Benue Plateau axis that the S-men have decided to always terrorize is where yam is produced in large quantity. A tuber of yam now sells for around 4,000 naira, just one tuber. So look at the problem that is causing. We are not even able to feed ourselves. despite our huge population. Yes, we have the potential to produce en masse, to export, to even process. That is just in the area of agriculture. Why do we have to maintain a single grid when already politically we've divided the country into 6 geopolitical zones? Why not decentralize the grid system so that each geozone will have its own grid network? And if you cannot do that, we know that, okay, the north is known for agriculture, the south is known for industry. Why can't you concentrate power at the industrial sector so that they won't need to be producing using generator, and they will be able to produce at a cheaper rate? You understand? Why can't we fix the refineries and encourage others to build more so that we'll have full refining capacity? For instance, US population is not double our own. US population is less than 500 million. Our own is around 220 million. Now, they have over 1,000 refineries. We are yet to have 5. Look at that difference. Meaning that if our population is half their own, if they have 1,000 refineries, they're supposed to have 500. So until we develop all this capacity, then we can't even have a say. Then government need to really know that they are there to serve the people and not themselves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badejoko Adesumbo, a social commentator, has given us an overview also on the Trump's tariff